Number: Human Battlefields. Through Alien Eyes, Secrets that Shook the Galaxy. Commander Zethkari had seen death across 1,000 worlds, but nothing prepared him for the human battlefield on Kepler 442b. The Veltar reconnaissance officer crouched behind crystalline formations, his 4 eyes scanning the impossible scene before him. Where any sensible species would have retreated hours ago, the humans continued their assault against overwhelming odds. The planet's crimson sky churned with smoke from burning vehicles, and the acrid smell of plasma burns filled the thin atmosphere. Zethkari's breathing apparatus filtered the toxic air as he observed the human forces through his bioscanner. What he witnessed defied every military doctrine taught in the Galactic Defense Academy. 3 human soldiers held a position against 47 Kreeth warriors. The mathematics alone should have guaranteed their extinction within minutes. Yet somehow, impossibly, the humans were winning. Private Sarah Chen ducked behind a fallen boulder as emerald plasma bolts seared the air above her head. Her rifle, a primitive kinetic weapon by galactic standards, barked repeatedly as she returned fire. Each shot found its mark with terrifying precision. The Veltar commander watched through his scope as she eliminated 3 Kreeth soldiers in rapid succession, their chitinous armor proving useless against her primitive bullets. Beside Chen, Sergeant Rodriguez moved with fluid grace that reminded Zethkari of apex predators from his homeworld. The human carried what appeared to be an explosive device, advancing toward the Kreeth position despite the withering fire directed at him. Energy bolts that should have vaporized him seemed to miss by impossibly narrow margins, as if the universe itself bent to accommodate his survival. The third human, Lieutenant Morrison, coordinated their movements through what Zethkari's translator recognized as profanity-laden tactical communications. The Veltar officer had studied 17 different combat languages, but human battlefield communication remained uniquely aggressive and somehow inspiring. Morrison's words seemed to fuel his companion's impossible performance. As Zethkari watched, Rodriguez reached the Kreeth bunker. Instead of using conventional siege equipment, the human simply hurled his explosive device through a firing port with deadly accuracy. The subsequent detonation eliminated 12 enemy soldiers in one stroke. The remaining Kreeth, species known throughout the galaxy for their fierce determination, began what could only be described as a retreat. This violated everything Zethkari understood about warfare. The Kreeth never retreated. They were biologically incapable of fear, their brain chemistry preventing the emotion entirely. Yet these creatures, who had conquered 43 star systems through sheer bloody determination, were fleeing from 3 humans. The Veltar commander activated his personal recorder, knowing his superiors would never believe this report without evidence. He zoomed in on Private Chen as she advanced on the retreating Kreeth. Her face showed no emotion that Zethkari could interpret, yet something in her eyes made his own species' danger instincts trigger violently. Every evolutionary alarm in his body screamed at him to flee from this small, soft-skinned predator. Chen's rifle continued its methodical work. Each shot demonstrated accuracy that surpassed most military targeting computers. The Kreeth, in their panic, abandoned heavy weapons and equipment that any other species would have died defending. Their retreat became a rout as Morrison's squad pursued them across the battlefield. As the skirmish ended, Zethkari observed something even more disturbing than the humans' combat effectiveness. They showed no signs of exhaustion, despite having fought continuously for 6 hours. Chen checked her weapon with casual efficiency, Rodriguez collected abandoned Kreeth equipment, and Morrison coordinated with other human units over his communications device. They displayed the relaxed demeanor of soldiers after a training exercise, not a desperate battle for survival. The Veltar commander had witnessed the impossible. 3 humans had not merely defeated a superior force. They had psychologically broken a species renowned for its unwavering courage. As he prepared to withdraw, Zethkari noticed movement in his peripheral vision. Lieutenant Morrison stood 20 meters away, somehow having approached without triggering any of Zethkari's detection equipment. The human smiled, an expression that the Veltar commander's cultural database identified as friendly. Yet every instinct screamed danger. "You've been watching for a while," Morrison said in accented but fluent Veltar standard. "Your camouflage is pretty good, but you left heat traces in the crystals." Zethkari's hands moved toward his sidearm, then stopped. Morrison hadn't drawn his weapon, hadn't even assumed a threatening posture. The human simply waited with patient curiosity, as if encountering alien observers was routine. "I am Commander Zethkari, Veltar Reconnaissance Corps," he announced formally, deciding honesty might ensure his survival. "James Morrison, 3rd Infantry Battalion, Terran Colonial Marines," the human replied with equal formality. "Mind if I ask what brought you out here? This isn't exactly tourist country." The casual tone somehow made Morrison more terrifying than if he had been obviously aggressive. Zethkari had observed these creatures methodically eliminate a superior force. Yet Morrison discussed the situation as if commenting on weather conditions. "I was tasked with observing human combat effectiveness," Zethkari admitted. "Our intelligence reports suggested humans might pose a potential threat to galactic stability." Morrison's smile widened. "And what's your assessment?" Before Zethkari could respond, Chen and Rodriguez approached. Both humans moved with the same predatory grace he had observed during the battle. They positioned themselves to block potential escape routes without appearing threatening, a tactical maneuver executed with unconscious precision. "Well?" Morrison prompted gently. Zethkari looked at each human in turn. These beings had just demonstrated capabilities that challenged fundamental assumptions about warfare and biology. They had broken an unbreakable species, shown impossible endurance, and displayed coordination that suggested either psychic abilities or training beyond anything in the known galaxy. "I believe," Zethkari said carefully, "that our intelligence reports may have significantly underestimated the situation." Morrison nodded as if this was the expected response. "You're welcome to observe our next engagement if you want a more complete picture. We're moving against the Kreeth stronghold tomorrow morning. Might be educational." The casual invitation to witness what would undoubtedly be another impossible human victory sent chills through Zethkari's nervous system. These creatures weren't just effective soldiers. They were something entirely outside normal parameters of warfare and biology. As the three humans prepared to leave, Zethkari made a decision that would alter the course of galactic history. Instead of returning to his ship to file a standard reconnaissance report, he activated his emergency beacon and transmitted a priority alpha message to Veltar High Command. The message was brief, but unprecedented. "Request immediate council session. Human threat assessment requires complete revision. They are not what we believed them to be. Recommend extreme caution in all future interactions." As Morrison's squad disappeared into the crimson twilight, Zethkari remained hidden among the crystals, reviewing his recordings. Every frame confirmed the impossible. Humans had rewritten the rules of warfare simply by existing. The Kreeth equipment scattered across the battlefield told its own story. Weapons designed to punch through battleship armor had been abandoned by soldiers fleeing from primitive kinetic firearms. The implications staggered him. If humans could psychologically break the Kreeth, what could they do to species actually capable of fear? If 3 soldiers could rout a force of nearly 50, what could a full human army accomplish? The questions multiplied as Zethkari waited for extraction, each possibility more disturbing than the last. In the distance, human vehicles moved across the battlefield, collecting their wounded and salvaging equipment. Even their logistics displayed the same impossible efficiency he had witnessed in combat. They moved like a machine, but with individual initiative that no artificial intelligence could replicate. When the Veltar extraction ship finally arrived, Zethkari uploaded his complete recordings to the ship's communication array. Within hours, copies would reach every major intelligence service in the galaxy. The secret of human battlefield effectiveness would soon be exposed. Though Zethkari suspected few would believe the evidence. As his ship lifted away from Kepler 442b, the commander took one final look at the human positions. Campfires dotted the landscape where soldiers prepared for the next day's assault. They showed no signs of concern about tomorrow's battle against a fortified position defended by thousands of Kreeth warriors. The realization struck him like a physical blow. The humans weren't just confident about tomorrow's attack, they were looking forward to it. For them, warfare wasn't a grim necessity but something approaching recreation. They had evolved not just as predators, but as predators who enjoyed the hunt. Zeth Kari began composing his full report as the ship entered hyperspace. The galaxy needed to know what humanity truly represented. The question was whether anyone would listen before it was too late. Number human battlefields through alien eyes. Secrets that shook the galaxy. Dr. Yilanthes clutched her research pad with 3 of her 4 hands as she reviewed the impossible data streaming from the Kepler 442b observation posts. The Zephyrian xenobiologist had spent 2 decades studying combat stress responses across 17 different species, but the human readings challenged everything she understood about biological warfare limitations. The morning assault on the Kreeth stronghold had begun 4 hours ago. According to every combat projection model in the Galactic database, the human forces should have been eliminated within the first 30 minutes. Instead, they were systematically dismantling a fortress that had withstood siege warfare for 3 standard months. Through her observation equipment, Yilanthes watched human soldiers advance across terrain that should have been impassable. The Kreeth had positioned their stronghold atop a mesa surrounded by killing fields monitored by automated defense systems. Every approach route was covered by interlocking fire patterns designed to eliminate anything larger than a ground rodent. Yet the humans moved through this death maze as if following predetermined pathways. Private Chen, whom Yilanthes had been tracking since the previous day's engagement, crawled beneath sensor arrays that should have detected her thermal signature from a kilometer away. The humans somehow masked her heat emissions through techniques that violated basic thermodynamics. Sergeant Rodriguez demonstrated equally impossible abilities. The Zephyrian scientist watched him climb a sheer rock face while carrying 60 kilograms of equipment. The cliff face offered no apparent handholds, yet Rodriguez ascended with steady confidence. When her instruments analyzed the route, they detected microscopic variations in the stone that human fingers apparently used as grip points. These variations measured less than 2 millimeters in depth. No known species possessed tactile sensitivity sufficient to utilize such minimal surface features. Yet Rodriguez climbed as if ascending a ladder. Lieutenant Morrison coordinated the assault from a position that should have been impossible to reach. The human had somehow transported heavy communications equipment to a rocky outcrop that required technical climbing gear to access. Yet Morrison's equipment readings indicated he had made the ascent in full combat gear without assistance. The Kreeth defenders responded to human movements with increasing desperation. These were the same creatures that had conquered nearly 50 star systems through methodical, disciplined warfare. Their tactical doctrine emphasized overwhelming firepower and systematic elimination of enemy positions. Against humans, their doctrine proved useless. Yilanthes observed Kreeth soldiers firing energy weapons at maximum intensity, pouring enough destructive force to level city blocks into areas where single humans had been detected. The humans simply vanished from those positions, reappearing elsewhere to continue their advance. They moved like ghosts through what should have been inescapable kill zones. The fortress itself represented peak Kreeth military engineering. Constructed from materials that could withstand orbital bombardment, the stronghold featured automated defense systems capable of tracking and eliminating threats across 40 kilometers. Its command center lay buried beneath 50 meters of reinforced stone and metal. The humans reached the fortress walls within 6 hours. Yilanthes focused her instruments on the breach team as they approached the main defensive barrier. The wall rose 30 meters high and measured 4 meters thick at its base. Kreeth engineers had designed it to resist siege weapons capable of cracking moon surfaces. Corporal Williams, a human demolition specialist, examined the wall with casual interest. Through her enhanced audio pickups, Yilanthes heard him discussing placement options with his teammates, as if planning a recreational construction project. His tone suggested mild enthusiasm rather than the grim determination appropriate for such a dangerous task. Williams placed explosive charges at points that Yilanthes' structural analysis indicated would cause minimal damage. The locations made no tactical sense according to standard siege doctrine. When the charges detonated, however, the entire wall section collapsed inward with mathematical precision. The explosive pattern had identified critical stress points that the fortress designers had never considered. Williams had analyzed the wall's structural weaknesses in minutes, accomplishing what should have required weeks of detailed engineering study. Through the breach poured human assault troops moving with coordination that defied explanation. They flowed like a single organism, while maintaining individual initiative. Each soldier adapted to changing conditions without apparent communication. Yet their movements remained perfectly synchronized. The Kreeth defenders inside the fortress activated emergency protocols designed to trap and eliminate invading forces. Blast doors sealed corridors, while automated weapons systems engaged predetermined firing patterns. The stronghold became a maze filled with deadly mechanical guardians. The humans navigated this death trap as if they possessed detailed architectural plans. They moved through passages that led nowhere, avoided trapped corridors, and systematically disabled defense systems with techniques that shouldn't have been possible. Yolanthes recorded everything, though she doubted her own instruments. Specialist Kumar, a human engineer, somehow identified which blast doors concealed passage routes, and which were false entrances designed to trap invaders. His success rate approached 100%, despite having no apparent method for distinguishing between identical-looking barriers. Sergeant Foster demonstrated equally impossible awareness of automated weapon systems. She moved through corridors covered by hidden gun emplacements, without triggering a single response. The weapons remained active, as confirmed by Yolanthes's sensors, yet they failed to engage the human target moving directly through their firing zones. When Foster finally triggered a defensive system, she was already positioned to disable it. Her movements suggested she had known the weapon's location, arc of fire, and activation sequence despite having no access to fortress schematics. The human advance through the stronghold proceeded with mechanical inevitability. They encountered each defensive measure exactly once before developing countermeasures that worked with perfect reliability. Their learning curve violated every model of adaptation and battlefield innovation. Within 8 hours of beginning their assault, human forces reached the fortress command center. The Kreeth commander, General Thruckmore, had sealed himself behind barriers designed to withstand direct nuclear attack. The command bunker represented the ultimate expression of defensive engineering. The humans breached it in 47 minutes. Yolanthes watched through microdrones as Morrison's team entered the command center. General Thruckmore, a veteran of countless campaigns, stood surrounded by his remaining officers. The Kreeth general's body language indicated complete psychological collapse. "How?" Thruckmore asked in Universal Standard, his translator rendering the question with obvious desperation. "How did you reach this place?" Morrison removed his helmet, revealing features that looked remarkably ordinary for such an extraordinary being. "We walked," he replied with matter-of-fact simplicity. The answer seemed to break something fundamental in the Kreeth commander. Thruckmore, who had held 37 fortified positions against numerically superior forces, formally surrendered his command to a force 1/10 the size of his own. As the fortress fell, Yolanthes compiled her observations into what she knew would become the most significant xenobiological report in galactic history. The data challenged basic assumptions about species capability and biological limitation. Humans demonstrated sensory acuity beyond known parameters. Their tactical coordination suggested either telepathic communication or training methods that approached supernatural effectiveness. Their endurance levels defied metabolic modeling, and their psychological resistance to stress appeared unlimited. Most disturbing of all, they showed obvious enjoyment of combat conditions that would drive other species to psychological breakdown. Human stress hormones during peak battle conditions matched pleasure responses recorded in recreational activities. These weren't just effective soldiers. They were beings who had evolved warfare as entertainment. Yolanthes transmitted her preliminary findings to the Galactic Science Consortium, while human forces consolidated their control of the fortress. The response arrived within hours: immediate deployment of additional observation teams, and a request for detailed biological analysis. The galaxy's scientific community wanted to understand how humans had developed such capabilities. More importantly, they needed to know if these abilities could be replicated or countered. As she prepared expanded observation protocols, Yolanthes noticed movement in her peripheral sensors. Lieutenant Morrison stood outside her concealed observation post, apparently having detected her presence despite multiple layers of advanced camouflage. "Dr. Yolanthes, I presume?" Morrison said in fluent Zephyrian Standard. "Commander Zethkari mentioned you might be joining our observation program." "Oath. Mar. Lungstan. Oath Filt." The casual tone terrified her more than any threat could have. Morrison spoke as if her presence was expected, planned for, perhaps even desired. The implications suggested human awareness extended far beyond anything she had recorded. "I've been documenting your species' combat capabilities," she admitted, seeing no point in deception. "Good," Morrison replied with obvious satisfaction. "We'll be moving against the Kreeth Fleet Base next week. Much larger operation. Should provide excellent data for your research." The invitation carried casual certainty that chilled Yolanthes to her core. Morrison spoke as if the outcome of the next engagement was already determined, as if human victory was a natural law rather than a military objective. As Morrison rejoined his unit, Yolanthes updated her research conclusions. Humans represented something unprecedented in galactic evolution. A species that had weaponized every aspect of their biology and psychology for warfare, while maintaining the ability to function as a sophisticated civilization. They were, she realized, the perfect predator. Human battlefields through alien eyes, secrets that shook the galaxy. Ambassador Quilekvar trembled in his ceremonial robes as he approached the human delegation aboard the neutral station orbiting Proxima Centauri. The Galactic Council emergency session had been called to address what military analysts now termed the human question. 3 weeks of battlefield observations had shattered every assumption about humanity's place in galactic civilization. The crystalline corridors of Peace Station echoed with nervous conversations in dozens of languages. Representatives from 47 major species had gathered to confront a reality that challenged the foundation of interstellar politics. Humanity, previously considered a minor frontier species suitable for limited contact and resource extraction agreements, had revealed capabilities that threatened to destabilize the galactic power structure. High Admiral Vexthanor of the Hegemony Navy paced the conference chamber with obvious agitation. His species had maintained military dominance for 3 millennia, through superior technology and numerical advantage. The prospect of facing opponents who could defeat superior forces through individual capability alone had shaken his confidence in traditional military doctrine. "The recordings must be falsified," insisted Director Kalmes from the Trade Consortium. "No biological evolution could produce such capabilities naturally. Humans must be using hidden technology or receiving assistance from unknown allies." Ambassador Quilekvar reviewed the data streams one final time before the session commenced. The evidence was undeniable. Human forces had eliminated the entire Kreeth planetary garrison, using conventional weapons and tactics that any military academy would classify as suicidal. They had accomplished this feat while suffering casualties rates below what most species experience during training exercises. The numbers defied rational analysis. 3,000 human soldiers had defeated 40,000 entrenched Kreeth defenders in planetary-wide combat operations lasting 6 standard days. The Kreeth, biological warriors bred for conquest and incapable of psychological breakdown, had surrendered unconditionally after losing 60% of their force. More disturbing than the military victory was how humans had achieved it. Surveillance footage showed human soldiers advancing across battlefields where survival should have been impossible. They moved through artillery bombardments, energy weapon fields, and environmental hazards as if following predetermined safe routes. Individual humans demonstrated capabilities that stretched biological credibility. Soldiers carried equipment loads that should have exceeded their muscle capacity. They operated effectively in atmospheric conditions that should have caused immediate physiological collapse. They maintained coordination and tactical awareness during combat stress that should have triggered nervous system shutdown. The human delegation entered the chamber with casual confidence that set Ambassador Quilekvar's danger instincts screaming. General Patricia Hayes led the group, her bearing suggesting mild curiosity rather than diplomatic tension. Behind her walked the 3 soldiers whose battlefield performance had initiated the crisis: Lieutenant Morrison, Sergeant Rodriguez, and Private Chen. Quilekvar studied these beings with scientific fascination. They appeared completely ordinary by human standards. Average height, unremarkable physical development. No obvious genetic modifications or technological enhancements. Yet these 3 individuals had personally eliminated over 200 enemy soldiers while sustaining 0 casualties. High Admiral Vexthanor called the session to order with barely controlled hostility. "This council demands explanation for human military deception," Your species represented itself as possessing standard colonial defense capabilities. Recent battlefield observations suggest significant misrepresentation of actual combat potential. General Hayes smiled with polite confusion. I'm afraid there's been some misunderstanding, Admiral. Humanity has never misrepresented our defensive capabilities. Our military forces operate within normal parameters for our species. Normal parameters? Director Kalmes sputtered. Your soldiers demonstrate capabilities exceeding any known biological limits. Perhaps, Morrison interjected respectfully. The confusion arises from different baseline assumptions about biological limitations. The comment sent chills through every non-human representative. Morrison spoke with casual certainty that suggested human capabilities weren't exceptional achievements, but natural expressions of their species' potential. Dr. Yolanthes activated her presentation system, displaying biological monitoring data collected during the Kepler 442b engagement. Human soldiers maintain operational effectiveness under stress conditions that would kill most sentient species. Their sensory acuity, reaction speeds, and endurance levels exceed known maximums for carbon-based life forms. The data must be inaccurate, insisted military advisor Threx Pole from the Defense Coalition. No evolution could produce such specialized warfare adaptations without sacrificing capabilities in other areas. Sergeant Rodriguez stood with Morrison's permission. Sir, humans evolved on a planet where everything tried to kill us. Large predators, microscopic diseases, environmental disasters, and competing tribal groups. Survival required developing capabilities that you consider exceptional. The casual explanation horrified the assembled delegates. Rodriguez described Earth as if discussing weather patterns rather than evolutionary pressures that would have driven most species to extinction. Ambassador Quilekvar accessed his cultural database, reviewing humanity's evolutionary history. The information painted a picture of unprecedented selective pressure. Earth had experienced 5 major extinction events, countless smaller disasters, and environmental conditions that changed continuously throughout human development. Humans had evolved not just intelligence and tool use, but adaptability itself. They were biological generalists, capable of thriving in any environment, competing against any threat, and learning any skill necessary for survival. Your species, Quilekvar realized aloud, weaponized evolution itself. General Hayes nodded with genuine warmth. That's a beautiful way to express it, Ambassador. Humans learned to adapt faster than our environment could kill us. Eventually, we became the most dangerous thing on our planet. The admission silenced the chamber. Every species represented in the Council had evolved in relatively stable environments with specialized ecological niches. They had developed advanced intelligence and technology to overcome specific challenges. Humans had evolved to overcome everything. High Admiral Vexthanor attempted to reassert control over the session. Regardless of evolutionary history, current human expansion patterns threaten established territorial boundaries. Your colonies appear in systems claimed by hegemony forces without prior negotiation. Morrison exchanged glances with his companions before responding. Admiral, humans established those colonies before discovering galactic civilization existed. We've been expanding for generations using slower-than-light travel and generation ships. The timeline implications struck like a physical blow. While galactic species had spent millennia developing faster-than-light travel, humans had simply accepted the limitations of slower technology and launched colony expeditions anyway. They had been spreading across the galaxy for centuries without anyone noticing. Director Kalmes demanded access to human colonial records. Provide complete documentation of all human settlements and territorial claims. The Trade Consortium requires accurate mapping of current human space. That might be difficult, General Hayes admitted with obvious embarrassment. Human colonies tend to be independently established. Central Earth government doesn't maintain comprehensive records of all settlement efforts. The explanation sent panic through the trade representatives. Humans had been establishing colonies without central coordination, meaning their actual territorial extent was unknown even to themselves. Private Chen spoke for the first time during the session. Ma'am, should I mention the generation ships still in transit? Hayes considered the question seriously. I suppose that information will become relevant eventually. The casual reference to unknown numbers of human colonies still traveling between stars broke whatever composure remained among the delegates. Humanity represented not just a current threat but an expanding one that would continue growing regardless of political decisions made in this chamber. Ambassador HFY made a decision that would reshape galactic politics. Honored delegates, I believe we must accept a fundamental reality. Humanity has achieved something unprecedented in galactic evolution. Successful weaponization of adaptability itself. He paused to ensure his words reached every species representative. These beings don't simply excel at warfare. They excel at everything they choose to pursue. Their battlefield effectiveness represents just one application of capabilities that extend to every aspect of civilization. The human delegation watched this revelation with patient interest, as if waiting for obvious conclusions to be reached. What? High Admiral Vex Thanor asked with barely contained dread. Do humans want from galactic civilization? General Hayes considered the question with visible care. Primarily, we'd like to avoid unnecessary conflict. Humans prefer peaceful interaction when possible. We've found warfare to be inefficient for achieving most objectives. The qualifier "most objectives" wasn't lost on anyone present. Lieutenant Morrison added helpfully. Though humans do tend to excel at warfare when it becomes necessary, we'd rather focus on exploration, trade, and cultural exchange, much more interesting than fighting. As the session concluded, Ambassador HFY realized that humanity had already won, not through conquest or intimidation, but by simply existing. They represented capabilities that other species couldn't match, adaptability that couldn't be countered, and expansion that couldn't be stopped. The galaxy would have to accommodate humanity, not the other way around. Over the following months, trade agreements replaced territorial disputes. Cultural exchange programs substituted for military tensions. Every major species began studying human methods, trying to understand how such adaptability could be developed. The secret that shook the galaxy wasn't human technology or military doctrine. It was the realization that evolution could produce beings capable of mastering any challenge, simply by refusing to accept limitations as permanent. Humans had spent millennia learning to overcome impossible obstacles. They had turned this ability into their defining characteristic. Now they were loose in a galaxy full of new challenges to master. Ambassador HFY filed his final report with mixed emotions. Humanity represented both the greatest threat and the greatest opportunity in galactic history. They could destroy established civilization or elevate it to unprecedented heights. The choice, he suspected, would ultimately be humanity's to make.